Guys, I wanted to film a little video for you all on empathy and how empathy shows up in circling and how to use it to best effect. So in circling, we often think of empathy as this thing that you just do, like you're empathetic, you feel other people, like of course. But for many of us, that's actually a disempowering perspective because some of us don't feel like that. And one of the reasons is because there's a number of different types of empathy. So I want to go into this, and then we'll talk a little bit about why empathize in the first place, and then about how people might show up empathetically in circles and how to work with that. So the first thing is different types of empathy. There are 2 or 3 types, depending on how you count. The first is called affective empathy, and it means that I can resonate with your emotional experience. So you'll see this in circles where someone goes, yeah, I feel sad, and the circler or the participants will go, yeah, sadness, I feel this aching in my chest when you say that. So that's affective empathy. It's basically I'm feeling with you. Sometimes if you get really good at circling, you can even feel an emotion that the person themselves isn't aware that they're feeling. Like they're smiling and you say, oh, you're smiling, but I feel this discomfort in my chest, almost like an anxiety. I'm like, yeah, I'm totally anxious. So I don't know what this is, if it's mirror neurons or spirituality or what it is, but there are ways that we feel each other fundamentally. And it's a skill that can be trained, like tuning in when I'm with someone else. What is happening in my physical body? Like, am I feeling an emotion? Does it change when I look from this person to this person? You can even use a person as a baseline, or like look down at the floor. Okay, what do I feel when I'm just in my own body and with myself? Okay, I look up at this person. Does it change? Is there a different sensation? Ah, there is. Okay, so that is an impact. That's affective empathy. And when people feel joined in affective empathy, when they feel you feeling with them, it can actually be really freeing and beautiful. It's one of the beautiful places of circling when we're taking the step of feeling each other together, of empathizing, because it's actually an act of kindness. It takes something to feel with another person, to be willing to go to places of joy or pain. Sometimes those are scary places to go in ourselves. So another type of empathy is cognitive empathy. And cognitive empathy is, I'm going to walk through your world. I'm going to put myself in your shoes. I'm going to see like what the world must look like from your point of view. So a way of doing this is, say you have this person that smiles and you feel anxious at the same time. Well, a way of putting yourself in their shoes could be, so if I were smiling and I also felt anxious, I imagine that maybe there would be a way that I didn't feel totally safe to feel my own anxiety around other people, so I'd have to smile instead. Does that fit for you? Like, does it feel safe to feel anxiety with us? So it's basically like you're imagining what someone else's experience must be or might be, and you're connecting the mental steps to go through it. Like, okay, what might the world be like in your realm based on what you've said? And this is also like often taken as a really loving act because you're making the cognitive step to go over there and see if I can get what your world looks like. This is especially powerful if you don't just give them the end result. They're smiling, there might be anxiety in there, and you say, oh, does it feel safe to feel anxious with us? It's possible the person is like, no, it doesn't feel safe. But they might also be a little bit like, where did you get that perception? So with cognitive empathy, actually like telling the steps of how you've walked through it and being able to name that is super powerful. The last type of empathy I'll name is called defective empathy. And it's when you try to assert your reality on someone else's. Oh yeah, it's okay to feel sad. Just feel sad. And the person's like, I don't really feel sad. No, honey, you just feel your sadness. Like really, we're here for you. You can feel sad. So, the person actually has to be having an experience. And you have to have shared reality that there's an experience happening and that you're on the same page about it. That's empathy. The interesting thing about empathy is, for instance, I'm more of a cognitive empath. It's actually been a lot of work for me to try to train my ability to feel other people. I was raised in a very intellectual family. I'm good at like walking through what reality might be like for somebody else, but I'm pretty bad at feeling it with them. Whereas my friend and coworker Mark, who I lead with sometimes, is amazing at affective empathy. As soon as somebody starts feeling an emotion, he's already crying and they feel so loved and joined. And I can't do empathy the same way that he does. I've actually had to learn to work with my superpowers, which are cognition, which has me seem sometimes a little more removed from the circle-y. And so then I've had to develop affective empathy, like the willingness to basically go into, okay, so what experience in my life has been similar to this, and what emotion did I feel? Oh, okay, so now I have the emotion, and now I can step into your world with you and feel it with you, but I have to access that experience in myself. So that's another way to go into affective empathy, is actually through cognition, remembering a similar situation, pulling on that emotion and feeling how it might be the same. So something on these types of empathy, for many people, one of the reasons they come into circling is actually because they're getting feedback from people in their life that people are saying, hey, I can't feel you, or you don't seem connected to me, or I don't feel cared about, or just like they're running up into some block where people can't feel their empathetic response, or this person just doesn't even have an empathetic response. So it either might be they don't have one, or they do have one, but other people can't perceive it. And circling can be really powerful in these situations, because either you get circled and you realize there's a way that you're not expressing your emotional experience on the outside such that other people receive it. You can actually get feedback on how to do that more, like when people feel you and when they don't. I've seen a lot of people have transformation through that. Or you can actually deliberately work these muscles. It's like cross-training. Can I practice, and maybe like you start doing meditation like solo every morning, and you start noticing what's happening in my body, what's a physical sensation, how does it change, and then when I'm with someone else in a circle, is there a change in my physical sensations? Can I notice that? Can I speak it? So that's one way in. And another is cognitive empathy. Like, can I train this kind of deliberately trying to take on your point of view? And even the act of trying often occurs as loving, regardless of whether or not you're correct. Circling can also train defective empathy, but we're not really looking for that. So yeah, these things can be trained. I want to say one more thing on empathy, which is a really fascinating perspective that I think of why empathy is important. So have you ever gotten into an argument with someone and they say, this thing is true, and you say, well, actually I have a different perspective on it. And then they batten down even harder. Well, this thing is true. Like maybe you're talking with your parents about politics and they're like, yeah, like, socialist policy, like collecting more taxes in order to give back more is actually like disempowering. It means that the money that we've worked hard for, we don't get. And your perspective is like, well, there's people that don't have the same opportunity to work hard for that money. So it's like fundamentally unfair. And they're like, well, they batten down even harder of like, well, we should have the ability to keep the money that we worked so hard to make. And people that are poor should just like work harder to create this sort of income. And you get into this kind of pissing match where both of you are trying to assert your perspective and neither of you are really hearing each other out. And this happens even in smaller versions in romantic relationships or work partnership. It's like, well, you were supposed to take out the trash. Well, I took out the trash last week. Well, you're still supposed to take it out. Well, and you get into this back and forth, and it's really non-productive. Like, you get to feel your emotions, you get to be upset at the other person, but the problem doesn't fundamentally change, and you don't really feel closer to each other. So the thing about empathy is, when you join someone in their experience, they naturally differentiate. And when you differentiate from someone, they naturally kind of batten down more into their experience. So it's basically like, we tend to kind of go to the opposite of whatever we're in. So if you're holding one pole and I hold the other pole, we're just going to get stronger in the poles that we hold until one of us makes the choice to go, okay, like, so what I get is that you feel really strongly that you've put in the work to earn this money. And it's important to you that that feels valued and that you actually get to benefit from it. And like that you've put in all this time and effort, and then at the end of your life, you have something to show for it. Like you've actually sacrificed for it. Is that true? And your parents go, yeah, that's totally true. And then maybe you say something like, do you think that's the same for everybody? And then you kind of go in through their perspective. And now, if they feel fully joined, like if you really get their world again and again, they may even naturally start to say, yeah, and like, we get that maybe that's not the same for everyone. When we feel heard, we feel comfortable to actually trying a new perspective. A really good example of this, Mark Michael Lewis and I were talking about this in a call the other day. This is an example that he used of if you show up late for something and you say, the difference between showing up late and you say, hey, I'm late, I know, but it's not really an issue. Like, my car broke down and it's only 5 minutes anyways. Naturally, the person's reaction to that might be, well, yeah, like, I was waiting here and it's not just 5 minutes. Like, I want you to acknowledge that you were late. So, we're differentiated perspective. We differentiate as well. The difference between that and somebody shows up and says, hey, I know I'm late. I'm so sorry. I consider your time really valuable. I really want you to know I'm not going to do it again, and I respect you and I apologize. Then you're more likely to say, oh, it's just 5 minutes. Like, it's really not a problem. Like, don't worry about it. So if we were having an experience of feeling like a little annoyed of that this person was showing up late, like if you're a kind of person that gets annoyed if someone shows up a little bit late, if we feel joined in that experience, we feel freedom to take the opposite point of view. If we feel resisted in that experience, we feel a need to batten down and defend our own reality. So the beautiful thing about empathy is, and the reason that so much transformation can happen in circling without actually trying to change anybody, is when you fully join someone in their experience, they naturally change their perspective. And you can do that affectively or cognitively. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.